It's almost been 3 months since the release of Counter-Strike 2 to the public, and along with its many controversies and praises, the gameplay seems to be getting more stable as time goes on. But one thing that's been plaguing Counter-Strike players for years now is a cheating problem that's been talked about by multiple people already. But the question remains as to why Valve has never released a fully functional anti-cheat system. Is it an impossible task that requires multiple geniuses to get it working, or is Valve intentionally ignoring the problem? Well, as with many things, it's actually a combination of both. In this video we'll explore some concepts that will help you understand how cheats work in CSGO, and most likely used in CS2, as well as the process that's required to develop a new game, in this case Counter-Strike 2, and how Valve has intentionally ignored an anti-cheat solution for the time being.
Alright, okay, I'm in agreement.
Whenever a company the size of Valve decides to create a new software, in this case Counter-Strike 2, it must go through the same process as any other big-scale software that involves a minimum of these 5 phases: analysis, design, development, testing, and maintenance. In this video we'll take a look at the analysis phase, where the company will pick up the requirements that the software needs to include in order to be released to the client or public. In other words, this is where the managers or the analysts sit down and write all the core features of their future product. In order to get these requirements, they might do research, interviews, proof of concepts, and so on. In Valve's case, they already had an established product with Counter-Strike Global Offensive, a game that was maintained for a decade with active feedback from the community. So gathering these requirements should have been pretty straightforward, and most likely they looked something like this. Update graphics to be more in line with modern shooters? Check. Port Counter-Strike into the new engine for cleaner updates and maintenance? Absolutely. This second requirement probably was more beneficial to Valve than anything else, simply because Unreal Engine already has around 20 years or more of existence, and maintaining such legacy code can be a pain in the ass for the most part, and creating new updates, maintaining new code, even introducing a hack to the chicken would have been a huge effort due to how messed up the code would have been, which I'm sure that's why they needed to change to a new engine. Revamp smokes and make them consistent throughout any server, and finally the famous subtick. Probably they had a very long requirement for that. And these are all very technical, gameplay focused requirements that cannot be achieved immediately and will need constant updates to polish to the degree of perfection that CSGO had. But interestingly enough, CSGO didn't die because it lacked on any of these previous requirements, but due to its cheating problem. And I guarantee you that there is 0.01% chance that Valve didn't know about this. It's almost impossible for them to not know that the main problem their game has are hackers. So you can definitely add that bullet into the requirement list as well. These are just general requirements though. Each one of them needed to be carefully assessed, and countless of very specific requirements were created out of one single general requirement. All of this is to say that Valve is well aware that cheating is a problem, yet they decided to rank it as a low priority requirement with thinking of the core features that the game should have on release, because and I mean every company that develops software goes through this process of requirement analysis. So then what? Well, there are 2 current possibilities that I'll leave you guys to decide. Either Valve is working very hard on an insane anti-cheat that they purposely left to be released later, or they just really don't care and will never fix it, just like with CSGO. Is it justified then, all the backlash and hate that Valve gets for not providing a useful anti-cheat? Well, at least for CS2, it is a massive failure on their part for not releasing it on launch. They completely missed the mark, and shows how little they care about the general community. Technically speaking, Valve is full of talented and great engineers that have developed incredible tools, games, and software that still blows my mind. But they always have lack in their management, and this is a prime example of it. Ignoring a massive problem and hoping that no one will complain about it. Is it really hard to develop an anti-cheat? Absolutely. Although I am no hacker, I took some time to investigate on general concepts and techniques to develop an anti-cheat, and let me tell you, it is not easy. There are many processes that need to be tracked constantly and efficiently, otherwise you hinder the game's performance. And more importantly, it's a lifetime work. meaning that you constantly have to release updates due to hackers finding new exploits. Cheaters will never be stopped, but can be dramatically reduced. If Valve ever releases an anti-cheat, it'll probably fix around 80% of the cheats used at the time. And then, people will find new exploits in less than a week. So this is just an infinite loop. If you go online and search for CSGO hacks, you'll find forums that are over 10 years old, Reddits, GitHub repos, and even independent sites that I really didn't want to open since they look very shady, that even go in detail about how they achieve their hacks. The bare bones explanation is that they find openings during the software lifecycle, where they can inject custom scripts that either change environment variables, trigger game functions, or even run custom code that allow people to cheat. Obviously it is way more complicated than that, but this is just a small overview. Cheats can be found on both free and paid versions. Paid versions are just often easier to use due to them coming in an executable file that you just have to run. A lot of them even come with graphical interfaces for you to use, while free versions are bare bones scripts that require programming knowledge in order to get them working properly and need to be used through a third-party injector. They commonly target the RAM since that's where the games store most of its information about players in the overall match, and they can either change or introduce values into the game itself, or literally even take control of your computer to kill a player. That's usually how aimbot works. With this in mind, why is Valve anti-cheat such a failure? Well, we first need to understand what VAC even is. On the Steam page, VAC is described as: VAC stands for Valve Anti-Cheat, an automated system designed to detect cheats installed on users' computers. If a user connects to a VAC secured server from a computer with identifiable cheats installed, the VAC system will ban the user from playing that game on VAC secured servers in the future. The VAC system reliably detects cheats using their cheat signatures, and any third-party modifications to a game designed to give one player an advantage over another is classified as a cheat or hack and will trigger a VAC ban. This includes modifications to a game's core executable files and dynamic link libraries." End quote. Basically, you can see VAC as a software that scans a user's system files while the game is running. Note that VAC only works for multiplayer modes, and one interesting feature that I found on the hacking threads is that VAC really doesn't care if they detect cheats on your machine, but whether you're affecting other players or not. As a developer, it doesn't take much effort to really understand how to bypass VAC, with all the previous work that's been done by the community. Multiple threads and forums out there provide detailed instructions and tips for tricking VAC and being able to develop and inject your cheats into the game. Simple things like adding dummy code along with the cheats to trick the algorithm, or encrypting strings are common actions that generic cheaters use. Keep in mind that this is different than the actual work of finding the exploits through the game's memory and how it functions. That's a way harder task to handle. Counter-Strike 2 is like an OnlyFans creator. Great look from the outside, but plagued with internal issues and no hope that they will ever be resolved. We just have to wait and see what Valve decides to do in the future, since the game has a ton of potential. But with Valorant well cemented as the best competitive FPS, and other games that listen to their community more often than Valve, potential can only take you so far.